One of the classes I took in college as a prerequisite to enter the medical program was a class about death. And I know you hear the rain going on in the background. Like it is what it is, So maybe it just adds on to the scenery here, but whatever. This was my first time ever taking an online class, by the way. It was very weird to me doing it this way. It wasn't very interesting because it was more or less about the technical side of death, the anatomy of the body when it goes through phases after you die. A very genius process designed by whomever you give credit to that for. Which leads to another issue when, years later, I had a sort of existential crisis. I found myself constantly in anger about death, religion, and the general belief of whatever system is out there. At that same moment in my life, I wanted to die. But I felt anger about this feeling because I wasn't assured of anything being after. And if there was something after I died, I felt like I would not have been forgiven for my actions. That being dying under my own choice and will. We can't all agree that life is good. And we are all born under different circumstances, which that is only true for some, right? Where you're born in better circumstances than others. So some people may say life is just good. Some of us is not. And, uh, you know, even though some people are given more of this world than others, it doesn't disqualify what someone may desire, which is an early death. These emotions are spawned from reaching a certain point that doesn't seem like it will ever return to a better moment. Last video, I was directly talking about the impact of depression, and I just got out of the war like a week ago. I was mentioning that too, and I cannot express more clear about how I cannot control these urges to not be around, despite the love, care, and things I can account for and be grateful for in my life. Things aren't that simple. People from the outside like to make it seem like issues are simple. Every day waking up feels like a chore if you're not in the right mental space, I should say. People also build insensitivities to these topics because of their own born conditions. For example, I was playing this game with this one guy months ago, and we were on Discord, and I expressed to him some of the things that I was going through during that time period. And he said directly to me that he doesn't understand it because in his country, which he said is a pile of trash, according to him, nobody really talks about mental health issues because there are things worse going on in this country. Now, my father is also very similar to this. My father is from a country where it's not very wealthy. They only recently got their independence. And he still says this to me. He says, if someone wants to off themselves, just do it, man. Like, all right, like, bro, you saying that to me too, like, idiot. Like, do you think about what you say? But these different cultural attitudes towards this topic, especially those with no relation to it, proceed to instigate it or encourage the stigma, these people, that help is not needed. Rather, they want you to simply man up or just do it, bro. And for those who also feel that way, right, to just man up and that solves everything, I challenge this thought by multiple levels. I mean, first of all, when you are living in a reality where you feel your social connections are not in plenty, like you may have social anxiety or you're lonely or you're isolative, like myself, you find yourself in a position where the last option for you is to want to get help. You're not into social connections that give you the confidence to find help. Little do you know, a lot of these anxiety issues come from past trauma and abuse. People who don't experience much trauma and abuse struggle to empathize with the topic of death, specifically those who want death. And let me play with the idea that my dad says about just do it if you really want to do it. And I made a point a few videos back about my personal understanding is that, like, I had two people in my life end things short. It has been numerous years since, and I still cannot find closure for that. Especially since one of those people, I was being petty and didn't want to swallow my pride and check up on him. We haven't spoken in years, and in a week or so before he took his life, I said, "Nah, I ain't gonna hit him up. He probably don't even care about me. Like, he got better friends now. He seems happy with his friends. He seems way happier with them than with me. Like, why even talk to him? You know what I'm saying? I'm just probably just gonna be a burden to this guy." Well, who knows? Maybe me just saying something to him at least showed that I cared. It could have shifted the decisions he made later on, which unfortunately made him not alive anymore. There's a saying that goes, to get love, you must have to give love. You don't get love for no reason. And don't get that line twisted, because there's a difference between love versus attachment. Everyone goes through problems that create extremely stressful situations that they do not feel that they can overcome. It's not even always about social aspects. There's also financial stuff, losing a job, having struggles with money just in general, right? Did I already say financial? And even having an illness can really push to a feeling of failure. But not everyone has the strength to pick themselves up again. So when you hear someone feel insensitive about the topic, it just shows that they never been knocked down before. Truly, they may have been shaken or slipped up before, but to not empathize with those struggling to get back up again and just encouraging them to stay down and rot and die off, it says a lot about someone's character. We can even go to a biological argument about the survival instinct that we have as humans. Even when we feel an intense urge to die, our subconscious will become overrun by the idea to keep on living. And further about instincts, we feel there is an unknown after this current life, which a little bit scary. We'll get into that later into this video, but like, it's scary to some, to others, you've sort of grown numb to it. It's hard to truly fight an urge that our body will biologically resist with this survival instinct. This urge that plagues your mind, even though we know that we're in a really bad state, we can still say that there's a very small amount of hope left in us. And what's scary is that some of us don't even know what that hope really is. I mean, I shared mine. I lost people, and it still hurts me years later. I don't want to do what these people who are in my life right now and who care about me, they say hurt people do hurt people. I don't want to hurt people. So, me losing those people, what it did to me, I don't want to do that to them. It gives me a sense of hope to let me just keep going. And it keeps my rationale to hang on still. But oftentimes, we don't know what else we hope for. Not everyone has people who they lost in their life like that. Like, besides things getting better, like we don't know what we hope for. Why do we think things are going to get better? What do we expect to happen? We don't really even see it happening that well. Like, even for those watching or listening to this video, do you truly know what is keeping you around? What is keeping you hanging around like that? You may give it credit to a person. You may give it credit to something that is entertaining you. But if that person wasn't around, if that thing wasn't entertaining you, what would you hold on to for? It's clearly something. Something is doing it. That is important enough. Even if you don't know, it's worth noting and discovering. Someone told me a story recently that made me really upset. I thought about it so much and I cried because it wasn't the story itself. It's just what he said to me after it. The story, he said, he was like, we were on the phone and he was like, They used to have a friend, a really close friend who he always hung out with. And my friend finds out that the guy, the close friend, cheated on his wife. And later on, the wife finds out that they got cheated on, but stays with him. And even though they stayed together, she got her revenge by starting to sleep around with his employees. So she basically sleeping around with his employees as revenge for him cheating. My friend's close friend, right? Years later, they grew apart. Marriage is over. Find out he was in the garage, and to keep details minimal for YouTube purposes, he cut his life short. And despite this being a very short story, it's a kind of a sad one, and it kind of maybe make you feel a little bit angry about, people getting revenge. But my friend was so animated about telling me this story about how selfish it was, because my friend had the same number for years, and they were close friends. But even though things got bad and it got rough, you still had somebody there to listen, and you didn't call. Even if you didn't think about it, what about all the people listening? And that's that. You know what bothers me about that story? What I just said earlier about how I didn't contact my friend because I held up my pride. Things were going on. I just held up my pride, bro. And then next thing you know, they're gone. And then I feel like it's selfish. Like, why'd you do that? Why'd you? And you know what? You know what's crazy about this too? Like, it bothers my friend to this day because that close friend who took his life, he's a good guy otherwise, makes a terrible mistake and he faces the consequences for it. And you may wonder, how does this warrant taking your life, right? I didn't think about it, but then I thought about how things started to stack up. And this is what I mean about overwhelming stress eventually pushing you to that point. Remember, this ruined his marriage, but she was sleeping around with his employees as revenge. What do you think happened to his business? Who knows what else he was getting himself into? So you're messing up the financials. You're messing up the marriage. Sometimes just a bad romantic situation can throw you guys into a spiral, right? Imagine just losing everything too. So, and we don't know what else he was going through. And that's the sad part about this whole thing. And whether you want to blame him or her, it's not directly about that. The point of the story that my friend shared with me is that he was like, yo, Andre, you will make a ton of stupid mistakes. You will face consequences when you hurt people. What are you doing, bro? You don't think we're hurting deep inside when we see you hurt? But you know what? Once you get knocked down a few times and you're at a low, it's always going to get better, because you got to understand, we all have a lot of scars, but we made it this far in life. The scars is what made who you are today. Stereotypical type of thing to say, right? This, though, will make you better once your scar is healed. And I thought about him saying that to me over and over again, because that specific story about doing something selfish like that, it really hit home, because like many of you watching, I have scars in my past too, like you do. And I've been through stuff as you've been through stuff. And some of these scars, they can be opened again, right? But you know what? If it wasn't for some of these scars that we all have, me specifically with my scars, I've been better with certain things in my life because I was hurt earlier. Certain things that if it wasn't for these scars, I would be a fool to fall for it. Yeah, we know sometimes we still have this urge to die because the scars and wounds are crazy deep and they're not getting healed very well. But the past really did make the future. Even though when you're dead, you don't feel anything anymore, making people feel guilt and sorrow, like my friend said, is indeed a very selfish thing to do. But I get it, especially when you don't care about what happens next. Doesn't matter if you feel selfish, you don't care. And sometimes something that people don't tend to talk about with that note is that even though everything I'm saying here, it provides a concept of understanding remorse and the consequences of having an urge to die. At the same time, understand this. It now creates a burden of obligation or duty. An obligation that you have to endure the suffering of life, despite how much pain it puts you through. And to many, they say that that isn't fair. What I think it is deeply an unfair thing. We have expectations to be persistent while we deal with our own struggles. And tell me I'm lying here. Life doesn't always reward people who are resilient. People who have been through a lot or seen a lot, and yet they still stand tall with those scars, they all don't get out the best things of life. You know, I live in New York. I'm not too far away from the city. Whenever I go to Penn Station, homeless people are everywhere. Some of these are veterans. They fought for this country, came home, got nothing back, got nothing going on, thrown on the street. And listen, let's not get too political because that can turn into a political topic. But you get what I'm saying. We all go through hell and back. And despite being burned, scorched, and traumatized, we'll have nothing but sorrow to live through. But you got to stay strong, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. It doesn't seem very fair, does it? Especially when you've been through the stuff that you've been through for reasons that you have no control over. Or somebody just took advantage of a weakness or ignorant situation that you had. My point is, having expectations socially to endure pain does not disqualify the struggle. Now, don't get it twisted. This isn't some sad video essay about whatever. People just think this topic is not as complex as it may seem. Life brings so much despair to people, and often it is internalized or never addressed. In the same breath, you can't just be like, life is supposed to be easy, because it's truly not designed to be like that. Nobody said life would be easy. And you can't get mad that life isn't easy. It's designed to be filled with challenges. That's the whole point of wisdom. Many we will face these challenges. It's just, at times, these challenges are so difficult to endure and to overcome that obstacles are so hurtful, death seems like a better option. Don't let anyone ever truly make you feel like just because you don't cope as well as someone else, your feelings are invalidated. Does this make sense? You are justified to feel a way despite the societal standards someone has or their culture. When I mentioned that person who lives in that country he said that he's from, or how my father speaks about this subject, it's like, you're never going to get it, because the way you cope is the way you cope. And the way I cope is the way I cope. But the way you cope, trust me, both individuals, I know how they cope with their problems. I think it's just as bad. Okay? But I'm not going to nitpick at that one. But naturally, they got something to say about this. It's always interesting. A lot of what we think when it comes to ending things shortly with life, we think about what can resolve these issues. This desire to meet death is disturbing. But the way we handle it is done in various ways. We start taking medication. We start doing therapy. I don't think that's disturbing, but we find ways we find anything. We try anything. We start picking up self-care routines, or maybe even get into spiritual practices. Sometimes we think about the existence of this life to begin with. What's even the purpose? Some of you may ask. And that answer to that question is subjective. You have to find your own personal meaning. Some never find it, though. I'm not even completely sure I have found it myself yet either. For me, I'm sort of trying or even inspired by many different things and then thinking about what makes me the most happy, which I think is the best we all can really do. What truly makes you happy? Can you do it for long periods of time? Would you want to get paid from it as a career? Does it make you feel like there's something more about you that you didn't know about? Who knows, right? I think. Going back to the class I took that I mentioned earlier from the physical world about the class about death and stuff like that, we mostly understand what happens after we die. The body begins to decompose or whatever. But then some of us think about what's next. The afterlife. It's an interesting idea because the whole concept of believing in an afterlife is sort of creating a purpose of immortality. Afterlife literally means life after death, afterlife. I mean, come on. But are you sent to some building in the sky? Or maybe you're reborn as something different. Perhaps even the belief is like, even when you have a soul, maybe the soul can answer the question for you, depending on the belief system. You could tackle this conversation rationally by pressing on this topic of the existential outcome. At the end of the day, philosophically, we don't truly know if there is an afterlife. There is no scientific proof of this. We don't even have scientific proof that the soul exists. You might read or hear somebody say that there is proof, but they will proceed to throw in pseudoscience or pretend that they are an intellectual while explaining it to you, because many people who wish to proselytize you have made or pre-written arguments about why their belief system is the correct one, naturally, even though nobody truly knows the truth. And that's okay. It's okay, nobody really knows. There's nothing wrong with having faith, as long as you're not hurting other people, right? It becomes an issue to many when you try to divide people and disrupt harmony by trying to belittle others because they don't follow your same version of faith. I have peers of all different monotheistic religions and dharmic religions and so forth. And my ex was an atheist. Like, she was a stern atheist. You know what I'm saying? Like, she didn't want to have nothing to do with anything with religion. Listen, I don't care what many people believe in. Just don't try to force me to believe it too. In relation to the purpose of life and the topic of the afterlife, when I had my sort of moment years ago, I felt very unhappy because I used to wonder what was the point of life with all of this suffering, and we don't even get reassurance about what's next. There's so many belief systems. If we're in some sort of simulation or whatever, at least let us know, that this is how I felt years ago. I feel like if people knew what really happens after you die, let's say heaven and hell does exist, and I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying but I just want to make sure everyone understands where I'm going with this. If we know there is absolutely going to be punishment for evil doings, and there was a paradise for those who are always loving and giving to the less fortunate, I think faith in humanity would be restored for a lot of people, and a lot of people would change up their ways. Speaking of heaven and hell, a lot of people believe we already got the instructions of what not to do biblically. It's just, not everyone follows it because we got other belief systems and skeptics. Look, myself, I am not Christian or Catholic. I've said in older videos I am very much leaning towards Judaic mysticism, but I ain't officially tagged up under any belief system. I believe in the immortality of a soul, but I don't know where we go after. Do I believe God exists? I believe there's a designer and creator, yes. Are they as described in most religions? not for me. No, I can't prove it though. That's the thing. I can't prove none of this. Okay, so I'm not gonna force you to believe what I believe. That's just how I'm looking at things. Okay, if you try to force me to believe what you believe, then you're gonna do exactly what I'm saying, the proselytation. And listen, I wouldn't be mad if you disagreed. It's just how you approach it. There's a thing about, see, this is the thing about this topic that's so difficult with people. You may have a different belief than I do. I don't need to hate you because of it. There's no proof certain things exist, yet I have faith there are things going on out there. That's pretty much it for me. I spent so many years studying theology and reading religious scriptures. It's like, it is what it is. Everyone got the answers apparently, but it's all good though. This all started because people were coping about death. And some people have the urge to die and being accepted into whatever the next world is for them, right? When you think about the afterlife, you think about something that gives reassurance. It gives hope to why we suffer so much in this life. The most popular belief systems will tell you that we must suffer here and receive paradise after, but you must act a certain way. And then we have like dharmic belief systems where they believe once your body dies, the soul rejoins into a new body, or like in the Hindu traditions, people believe you can come back as an animal or even a god, a demon, or just back to a human again. Buddhism will tell you you can return back to anything like that. It's just, if things get good enough, you'll enter a paradise yourself, or nirvana as the name goes. So when you have like deja vu, for example, people will say that's because of your past life. Even certain possible personality traits or the karma system, it can be very interesting. But again, this is just another method of trying to find answers about death. Many belief systems do actually mark down, by scholars at least, that taking your own life or having the urging yourself to die is an act of sin, or in whatever belief system is just not okay, right? But it's such a touchy topic when it comes to religion, when we say something like this is sin, the afterlife, and taking your own life, because many people will give questionable answers to it. Like I just said, many scholars will say having an urge to die or taking your own life is a sin in itself. So like sinning before you die is going to imply to some people where you might go in the afterlife, which, listen, just add the pieces together here while I'm trying to, I can't find the right word right now, but it's really messed up if you think about it. But listen, I've seen people say that. And this comes back to what I meant about how weird religion can get. And when we talk about like a karma system or having certain rules and regulations about where you go after you die, it's a very weird thing, dude. It creates very dangerous topics to go on about that can be very hurtful to people. You can see from the many different things I went over today that humans have a very interesting obsession with death, whether that be in total of the human experience or just whether you figure out where you go next. I don't think about death from a technical standpoint as much as I feel like I should. My urges personally are impulsive. I've never been calculated with this subject from a personal experience level. That's what makes it so dangerous. It's not even about just mental health. Cultural practices like belief systems make you obsessed, but also set a boundary of expectations. I said something earlier in this video about how just because you don't cope the same way, it doesn't disqualify how you feel. Someone who is more religious or into the culture that they are into may invalidate your urges or even your perspective on death because you're just not on the same page as them. That doesn't make you wrong, and that doesn't make them right. It's about understanding that this is the inevitable. We're all gonna die anyway. Some say we technically live forever. And yet, that is another way of trying to find comfort in death. We think about memories and a legacy we want to leave on this planet, or at least the people around us in some form of way. Maybe even what a bond we had with somebody, what it can do. Like I mentioned people in the past who aren't here anymore for me. They left memories for me They're not physically here, but mentally, I hold things about them that I don't forget. So, are they technically living on still? I mean, if you want to play into the semantics, sure. There's a difference when we talk about reality versus perspective. And with religion or any belief system, we fear our mortality. Most belief systems look at death as an entrance to another life. Depending on the religion, there are different qualifications to what gets you to the other life. These are all thoughts and ideas that infiltrate many people on a daily basis, and it can be very tolling. We also overlook how media portrays death. We make movies about it. We write books about it. We even have full-blown series based on crime on like YouTube and on TV. It makes us become very fascinated with death. Even Gothic, the culture, style, aesthetic, is based around a darker look into mortality. And even though it fascinates us, it makes us a bit more anxious though at the same time. You ever watch one of those true crimes and suddenly you're paranoid about certain types of patterns you see from people? You thinking about death. Our obsession over this is so impactful that we always need to understand in our conscious, this is one of the curses to life, death. And specifically wanting it is asking for a lot. It doesn't seem like it. But when I quickly touched on how people believe we technically live forever, the misery, sorrow, and guilt others may feel, even if you didn't feel like they knew you like that, it's everlasting. And for now, it is time we go our separate ways. Another missed call. Another missed call. I said let's go two different ways. That's another missed call. Saying that I'll never leave and stay. That's another missed call. Hearing back from you and I wait. That's another missed call. Those desires for you start to fade. That's another missed call. That's another missed call. That's another missed call. That's another missed call. Thinking that I outgrow people more than I outgrow